When I was a tiny young person, what do you call them? A child. When I was a child, I watched old Witcher TV series, and it was so boring. A few years later, I read the books, and I loved them. Especially short stories, which in my humble opinion are much better than actual novels. I loved how Sapkowski reimagined classic fairy tales like Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Snow White, and Aladdin. And he put a monster hunter in the center of those stories. I still reread them from time to time. Back then I really hoped that someday I would be able to see high budget adaptation on screen. I never actually believed it would happen, but it was nice to think about. Thank you for destroying my dream. Wishing for anything these days is like using monkey paw. You wish may come true, but not in the way you want. It will come to life twisted and perverted with only one goal: to eat your brain away, leaving only sludge that will let you function at minimum capacity, just enough to be a productive member of hive mind society. There was always very little to like about Netflix show. Henry Cavill was great, but his armor is not only hideous, but it doesn't look like something that any Witcher would wear. I really feel sorry for Henry, a true fan who tried to salvage this garbage, but in the end he lost that battle. Hey, let's make it like the books. Also, let's make it nothing like the books. Ingenious. I struggle to understand Netflix mentality here, it's bizarre. You hate the original content, but you buy it because it's popular. Okay. But by changing it to suit your modern taste better, you eliminated the reason why it was popular in the first place, making it worthless now. You paid a lot of money to the author, who deserves that money, to make it worthless. That's a really shitty business model. Take a franchise, any franchise. Fail to understand it completely? Don't even try, what's the point? Make your own version, it will be so much better anyway. Any kind of business requires some kind of research. When your business is entertainment, it means you are actually here to entertain people. So the least you could do is find out why the stories you are adapting have any engagement value. But to figure out why the fans like those stories, you would have to actually listen to them. And when you have a fan on set and constantly continue to ignore him, when he is the only person trying to save your sinking ship, it becomes obvious to the entire world that you are to blame for it and nothing you say will ever change it. The main problem with franchise destroyers is that they don't understand the value of source material. They see it as a name that people know. Star Wars, The Witcher, Star Trek. These are only popular names for them. They don't care about the quality of the franchise they buy, they focus only on the recognition. How popular something is, not how good it is. It's like saying a pretty little nicely wrapped box with the name Witcher or Star Wars on it. The content of the box is why fans care about those franchises, but the companies care only about the box. They either never open it, or when they do, remove all the content and replace it with their own content. This process creates something that pretends to be The Witcher, pretends to be Star Wars, pretends to be Star Trek. The Witcher from Netflix is The Witcher in name only, but people don't care about the names. This is not like selling clothes or a new iPhone. People don't care about Star Wars because it's called Star Wars. They care about good storytelling. You can call it whatever you want as long as you give it a good story.
Do it.
So, back in the 60s, publisher Martin Goodman told Stan Lee that the reason his comic books were selling so well was because they had really catchy titles. Stan Lee proposed a bet. He claimed that he can sell any title as long as it is illustrated by Jack Kirby. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created a comic book series with the longest and most ridiculous title they could fit on the cover: Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. And people loved it, because both the writing and art were good. The name didn't matter, or rather Stan Lee's and Jack Kirby's names matter, because at that time people already knew that those two could produce some high quality comic books. The saddest thing about Netflix Witcher is that you don't even have to know the source material to understand how much they twisted it. You just need to look at the games, because both Netflix and CD Projekt Red use the same source material. The Witcher games happen after the novel, but they feel like the novels. When I was playing the games, I could really believe they were continuation of the books. The games are great because they faithfully adapt the source material. The entire world building was already done for them and they built new stories on it. The characters they pulled from the books not only look like those characters, but they also behave like them. Even the politics and the state of every nation feel like natural continuation of the books. On the other hand, Netflix Witcher feels nothing like The Witcher. Since Netflix was only adapting the books, they had a much easier job. When you have the story already written for you, big changes are not only unnecessary but also risky. Because if you deviate too much from the source material and your story is vastly inferior, then everyone will hate it. And since your audience are fans of games and maybe books, deviating from what people like about them is a waste of your money. Because any franchise comes with a fandom. A franchise is useless if you're not trying to please the fans, because that's the only way to get any money out of it. You can of course say that the old fandom is toxic and you are trying to build a new one, but that's a waste of your money. If you are building a new fandom, creating a new franchise is a much better solution, because a known franchise with already existing fanbase will be nearly worthless and most likely not worth the money you paid for it in the first place. You can just bully anyone into liking your hideous creation. It will never work. Not to mention that you are not providing a service anymore. This is more like extortion or a scam. Just one episode of Netflix show already proves that the showrunners didn't understand the source material. After watching more of it, you have the feeling that Netflix clearly wanted to bend the source material to look more like Game of Thrones. But those are very different worlds. And people like them for very different reasons. Game of Thrones is a fantasy heavily inspired by the history of medieval England. There is nothing wrong with medieval fantasy looking similar to the world Tolkien created. I got into fantasy thanks to Baldur's Gate 2. I finished it many times, and when I heard there were books from this universe, I was like, take my money! I read all of Robert Salvatore's Forgotten Realms novel he wrote at that time, and I was inspired by those stories and tried to create my own fantasy stories. I wouldn't be the same person I am now without Baldur's Gate. No, go away, go, no, go! Phew. You can't go to the forest or play any game these days without horny bird trying to assault you. We live in a really strange times. Where was I? Most of the well-known games are in fact based in Western Europe, mostly medieval England, all thanks to J.R.R. Tolkien. And we fantasy fans love them. But for how many years can you fight orcs, goblins, trolls and giant spiders? Eventually you will get bored of fighting the same type of enemy in every story. And every cave, every village, every castle and even the music will sound quite similar. I believe the Slavic spirit of the Witcher games is one of the main reasons why people liked it so much. Because while The Witcher is similar to the epic fantasy we all know and love, the addition of Slavic culture and folklore is enough to make it seem fresh and new. Slavic monsters alone are interesting enough to engage people in this culture. I didn't even know some of those creatures existed. And people love to learn about monsters from different mythologies and folklores. Netflix, however, took all of the Slavic spirit out of it and make it look like any other generic fantasy reduced in design to an inferior copy of greater stories like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or various D&D related media. There are other things missing from the Netflix Witcher like sarcastic humor, witty banter, a battle of wits, great fights, imposing enemies, likable characters, etc. etc. Everything is gone! Everything people loved about The Witcher, Lauren Fistech and her team of creatively challenged creators somehow managed to remove. I guess they changed things they didn't like about it, and since they hated nearly everything, they changed nearly everything. They even kicked out Henry Cavill, and he wasn't there for the money. Netflix would never be able to afford a star like him if he wasn't a fan. And the destruction is now complete. Without Henry, who was the main reason so many people were still watching season 2 and 3 despite the bad writing, there is nothing left. The Witcher TV show is truly worthless now. Netflix could milk so much more money out of it, but they decided to do their own thing. If you don't believe me, then look at the Blood origin, because that's how The Witcher looks without Henry Cavill. Never have I seen such a bastardization of the source material. Even the Rings of Power managed to get some things right. Not many, but still. Another franchise chewed and spit out by a clunky corporate machine. And let me ask you this. What was the point?